that we start is 11, 11. Thank you for coming to this first session on agricultural census. We had several sessions on agricultural census this week. This first session was organized by my colleague Oleg Kara. He's a statistician from FAO. He couldn't make it, he couldn't come, so he asked me to chair this for him. This session is about agricultural census in the framework on an integrated data collection system. So Oleg prepared some kind of description of this session, which I will read just to give the context of the session. The changing environment and data requirements have led many countries to conduct a detailed review of their agricultural statistics program towards a better integration of the agricultural censuses within the agricultural statistical system and the overall national statistical system. In an integrated framework, the Census of Agriculture focus on collect only essential items, structural items on the agricultural sector, while regular agricultural sample surveys can focus on collecting non-structural data items, which are needed more frequently. So, understanding the role of the agricultural census and the role of agricultural surveys and other administrative reporting systems is very important. It's very important to know the different role of these different operations and how they integrate each other for a more efficient system. And this philosophy, this concept about integration of agricultural statistics is very important nowadays, taking into account the needs to meet the SDGs information requirements. So this is the context of this session. The description prepared by my colleague is a little bit longer, but for the sake of time, I don't want to steal time from our speakers. We have speakers from Russia, Georgia, Hungary, Canada, and Spain. So each one of them will present their country experiences on the efforts that these countries have made to integrate agricultural statistics, the census of agriculture within the agricultural statistical system. So without further ado, I would like to present the first speaker. The first speaker is Mr. Konstantin Laikan. Konstantin was born in the Soviet Union. He graduated in 1979 in radio engineering, in the Radio Engineering Institute in automated control systems. He had a specialty in management in social economic systems, and in 2003 he got the degree doctorate of economics. In '93, he was elected in the State Duma of the Federal Assembly of the Russian Federation. From '96 to '97, he worked as deputy head of the finance department of the Ministry of Economy. Then later he headed the Department of Finance of the Ministry of Economy. He was member of the board of the Ministry of Economy of Russia. He was also appointed deputy minister of Labor and Social Development of the Russian Federation. And so he has had a very interesting career in Russia. And without further ado, I would like to invite Konstantin to deliver the first presentation.
I will tell you about Russian agricultural statistics, its problem, condition, and prospects. Agriculture is a driver of the Russian economy. Over the past 20 years, this industry has shown impressive, almost twofold growth rates. The country has already become the world leader in wheat exports. What features of the agriculture should be considered when organizing agricultural statistics? Instability of agriculture production. See blue graph on the slide. And this, is it not surprising? Look at the map of climatic zones of Russia. Agriculture production is distributed practically throughout the country. This industry has a complex and rapidly changing structure. This is connected with the diversified structure and with the multi-structure of our agriculture. Giant holdings and small private holdings exist at the same time. And multi-directional changes in various categories of agricultural manufacturers, and with increasing stratification within categories of manufacturers. Let's show please, how agriculture statistics is organized. It's based on international standard, you can see on the slide. Russian agriculture statistics has a solid legal framework. This is federal laws on official statistics, on agriculture census, on private subsidiary households, on small business development, as well as president decrees and government resolution presented on this slide. And of course, the federal plan of official statistics, which is updated annually by the government. According to the plan, 6 state departments are the subjects of official statistics in agriculture. The bulk of the statistical work is performed by Eurostat. The system of indicators is very large. The indicators are developed in various sections. Let's move to methodological issues. We use a combined observation method. At least one time in 10 years, the Russian agricultural census is conducted. The work is resulted in refined characteristics, structure of agriculture, and changes in development of agriculture in the period between censuses. For this, a lot of work is being done to recalculate the time series for the whole country and regions. In addition, the census allows updating general universe and on the basis of which we can develop for each category of agricultural producers the representative samples for current observation. Since over 10 years period, the Russian agriculture is dynamically changing. You can see before. The samples built on the old general universe are becoming less representative, and the statistical discrepancy is rapidly accumulating. For this reason, the rule to conduct micro-agricultural census was introduced in the Federal Law of Agricultural Census. The first micro-census will be held in 2021. Current monitoring in the period between censuses is organized so: for large agricultural businesses, full-scale observation is carried out. The remaining categories are observed by sample survey. For small businesses, sample is 25%. For farmers and individual entrepreneurs, 20%. For private subsidiary household, 23 million. Now 0.6, and until recently was only 0.2%. Detailed results of current observation and census are published on websites. Also, the access to the micro database is provided. And how about the main topic? And now about the main topic, about the quality of our current agriculture statistics, its reliability. This slide shows how the statistical discrepancy differs since the moment of previous agriculture census. As you can see, the categories of commodity producers where the sample is at least 20%, discrepancy is acceptable. But for households of citizens for which the small sample are not acceptable. This is how it affected the gross agricultural production index. For commodity producers, the discrepancy accumulated over 10 years was approximately plus 2%. And for households, about minus 13%. But in general, in the industry, minus 4%, such as approximately 0.4% on average per year. What is being done to improve the quality of statistics? Since the main problem lays in the survey of households, the main efforts are directed to this category. Reporting of rural administrators was cancelled. The sample was expanded 3 times. The compensation of interviewers was increased. Methodology was updated, carrying out the first micro-agricultural census. The use of satellite monitoring and unmanned aerial vehicles to check the data obtained during the census. And finally, the main thing is the transition from periodic agriculture census to permanent census, only for households. For example, 10% of the general universe per year, followed by full coverage of the general universe during the next 10 years. With traditional approach, periodical census, we have a number of fundamental problems, 5 problems. The first is the large sampling errors of sample surveys conducted during the period between census due to the small size of the sample. The second problem, the results of 2 agriculture censuses in Russia showed the general universes, especially in the regions, in the period between census 10 years, are subject to strong changes. The possibilities of clarify the size and structure of the general universe during the period between census are very limited, and the next census results will be very likely to differ from the current statistics. The third problem is the differences between the census results are the current statistic make up to provide extremely labor intensive recalculations of historical time series of agricultural statistical indicators. This leads to fourth problem. Now for authorities of all levels in the preparation and implementation the program. In the fifth big problem, the carrying of the overall agricultural census is associated with the need for a one-time allocation, a significant budgetary resource. For this reason, many countries are not even able to conduct the first agricultural census. A permanent agricultural census based on representative, for example, 10% annual sample, solves these problems. At the same time, the census of producers of commercial products will continue in accordance with the traditional approach. Our proposal was sent to FAO and received support. The introduction of permanent census in the statistical practice of Russia will begin in 2021 with agriculture microcensus, in which we observe immediately 30% of households. This measure will drastically improve the quality of Russian agriculture statistics. I think so. Thank you very much for your attention.
It seems that your presentation has been very clear, so thank you very much, Konstantin.
Thank you very much.
Now, I would like to invite our second speaker. He's going to present the experience of Georgia. Irakli Shikelashvili. Sorry if I mispronounce your last name. He has a specialization in information technology and mathematics. Has 3 years of working experience in the National Statistical Office of Georgia, Geostat. In 2016 to 2017, he was chief analyst. Excuse me, colleagues. He was chief analyst in Agriculture and Environment Statistics Division. From 2017 to 2018, he was head of data analysis and dissemination unit at the Agricultural and Environment Statistics Division in Geostat, and currently he is acting head of Agricultural and Environment Statistics Department. So, Irakli, the floor is yours. I would like to remind the colleagues that we have only 10 minutes because we have 5 presentations, and we like to give also chance for questions and discussion.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great opportunity to be here, and with pleasure I would like to share with you our experience on the linking of agricultural census with population and housing census in Georgia. Statistical system in Georgia is centralized. The law of Georgia on official statistics created general framework for statistical system in the country and sets coordination principles for all institutions responsible for producing official statistics in Georgia. Agriculture has always been one of the important sectors of Georgian economy. Share of agriculture, hunting, forestry, and fishing in the GDP is 8%, and 39 of employees in this sector, Georgia, were employed in the sector. Share of the rural population is 48%. Almost all households living in the village are agricultural holdings, and even in the small towns, 2/3 of households are engaged in agriculture. Over 3 out of 5 households are engaged in agriculture, and they are spread through every region of the country. According to the Census of Agriculture 2014, total number of agricultural holdings is around 642. Out of them, only 2,000 are legal entities. Due to a favorable geographical location and climate, Georgia producing more than 60 kind of permanent and annual crops. Also, animal husbandry is quite common in Georgia. One of the specificity of the country is that the agricultural sector is not well specialized, and the majority of holdings produce many different kinds of agricultural products. Geostat uses a system of integration agricultural censuses and surveys to produce official agricultural statistics. Agricultural census is the main source of frame for agricultural and aquaculture surveys. Agricultural census concentrates on key data based on the complete enumeration. The main source of agricultural statistics in Georgia is the survey of agricultural holdings, which dates back from 2007 by collecting data from 2006. Sample frame of the survey based on the agricultural census 2014, and its thematic models collect detailed data on the sample basis. Methodology was elaborated with the support of FAO and USDA. In November 2014, the National Statistics Office of Georgia conducted census of agriculture together with the population census. In fact, there was 4 different censuses conducted together: housing, population census, census of immigrants, and agricultural census. Additional census identified holdings operated in the sector of aquaculture and greenhouses. The census was conducted using GIS map. Geostat started preparatory work for the general population census in 2006. One of the principal parts of those works was implement GIS in order to create digital cartographic materials and use them in the census data collection and dissemination process. A supplementary work was done to cover the territories where cartographic material was missed. In addition of this, a numbering script was prepared in order to give its own code to each parcel and building located on its through the country territory. In the 2013, Geostat conduct preliminary field work to elaborate list of dwelling and households existing in Georgia in order to digitalize collected information and integrate it into cartographic data. There was developed software which was using coding system created by GIS groups. Information received from the preliminary work was used for correcting and finalize existing data on buildings and for distributing work among census enumerators effectively. By the implementing GIS, Geostat managed to significantly decrease time needed for preparing cartographic materials, use financial means in more efficient way, and prepare high-quality maps. Register of the legal entities engaged in agriculture was prepared separately. Due to the fact the general population census covered only household sectors. To fulfill the loss of agricultural enterprises, all existing reliable sources in the country were used. There is a list of those lists and preparation process of the census questionnaires was held under the international guidelines and recommendation, taking into account consideration local user needs. The census questionnaires consist of 4 separate parts, respectively to 4 different censuses: questionnaire on dwelling, personal questionnaire, questionnaire on immigrants, and questionnaire on agriculture. In total, census questionnaire had 9 pages. Each questionnaire had unique ID, which was linked them to each other. Since the population and agricultural census were conducted together, it was agreed to use the same reporting unit. So household was considered as one agricultural holding. In case of 2 or more holders in the household, one of them was selected as a holder, and their operated lands and livestock were summed up and assigned to the holder. In case of one or more households, each household was considered as a separate holding, and the land and livestock were assigned proportionally according to the share of households in the holdings. Questionnaire 1 on the dwelling conditions, as well as a full list of households and persons living in the dwelling with status of person. There were main identification question in the questionnaire 1 for agricultural holdings. According to them, if household was identified as agricultural holdings, questionnaire was filled by enumerators. Besides, questionnaire was identifying to the holder. Additional certain identification question on holdings operated in aquaculture. Questionnaire 4 covers all core indicators recommended by FAO and local user needs, taking into account for agriculture and census for legal entities, an electronic questionnaire was prepared, which also used for the census of municipalities, like a common land. The content of the electronic questionnaire was the same as a questionnaire for in addition to the questionnaire similar to the question 4. There were additional questions regarding personal characteristics of company. Just that conduct post-enumeration survey, and that gives us possibility to assess reliability of main indicators includes. As a result, census database contains information on the dwelling condition, personal information on population, personal information on immigrants, agricultural data holdings, and personal information of holders. The coding system included in the census database easily links all obtained data and creates master sample frame for agriculture. Georgian MSF covers various variables regarding family holdings, agriculture enterprises, households, immigrants, housing condition, aquaculture, greenhouses, and municipal land. Existing master sample frame is used and can be used for various surveys, and there is a list of those surveys. Master sample frame will be updated regularly by the data obtained from agriculture and social economic surveys and reliable administrative sources. Master sample frame facilitates identification and monitoring process in the field work, since it contains detailed personal data on the holders and his or her household members, as well as GPS coordination of the household location. It also gives great possibility to prepare maps indicated simply units for enumeration to be used during this field work. It will be decrease the time needed for data collection and improve data quality. As mentioned above, main source of agricultural statistics is survey for agricultural holdings. In 2012, Geostat started computer assisting web interview. In 2018, Geostat introduced CAPI method too, and there is a list of progress which we are monitoring and which we are observing. It is easier to finding sample agricultural holdings. We have tool for monitoring, easy to monitoring field work, and increase, and the data of and quality of data is increased, decreased time for data collection, and decreased operational costs. Geostat is also actively considering the extension of the survey for agricultural holdings to implement the agricultural integrated survey, which was recommended by FAO as a part of global strategy, which a particular focus on meeting the additional data user needs relating to agricultural sector and rural economy, arising from the implementation of the SDGs. In 2018, a number of FAO experts mission visit Georgia, meeting with the representative of Ministry of Environment Protection and Agriculture were held and considered their needs. Additional actively online consultation were held provided. Based on collected data, Geostat plan produced SDG 231 and SDG 234 indicators together with other new indicators. And in final, Geostat intensely cooperated with the international organization and donors in order to implement the best practices and improve survey process. USDA has been helping Geostat since 2007 by providing training for permanent staff and enumerators, organizing study tours, business trips, and granting equipments. Geostat works intensely with FAO experts as well. One of the important results of this mutual work was strategic plan for agriculture and rural statistics. Nowadays, most important activity which the supports of from the FAO is the implementation AGRIS program, which plays an important role in the development of agricultural statistics. Thank you very much.
As you can see, Georgia has been a little bit ahead in terms of linkages. They linked not only the population and housing census with the immigrants census, but also with the agricultural census. So this is something that FAO doesn't recommend. We recommend the censuses to be conducted separately. Sure, there should be a linkage between them, but we understand that some countries need to do it. And all we say to these countries is be aware of all the challenges when you are doing different censuses together. So it seems that Georgia has done a good job on that. I know they have been very well assisted, so I don't have doubts that they have done a good job. Let's open the floor for a couple of questions on Georgia's presentation. I see one there, yes. Please identify yourself, and as we have Mike here. Mike is coming behind you, I think.
Thank you for a good presentation. Mine is about cost of enumerating a unit.
Patrick, could you identify yourself?
My name is Patrick Okello. I'm the Director, Agriculture and Environment Statistics, Uganda Bureau of Statistics. So my question is about the cost of enumerating a unit. Have you bothered to calculate the cost of enumerating a unit, especially when you migrated from paper and pen interviews to use of tablets? Because you said in a blanket form that it reduces drastically.
Okay. Thank you, Alec. In long term,
sorry. Oh. Maybe we can take any other question, so you can answer both of them. Any other question? If not, I have one. I know the answer, but I think it's good to share this with the audience. You mentioned post-enumeration survey, right? So post-enumeration survey for this kind of operations, huge operations, is very critical. So my question is, what was the result of the post-enumeration census survey with respect to the agricultural census component? So probably you check coverage, right? Mm-hmm. in the post-enumeration survey, but probably also data content, quality, right? So in terms of data quality, what was the outcome of this post-enumeration survey? So if there is no any other question, you can answer, please.
Okay, answer for your question. In long term, when we are using copy method, it reduces cost of papers, and it reduces cost of data entry as well, because where we are talking about the electronic collection system, it's synchronized instantly with our server, and it took and it decreased time to collect our information too. And about your question, it's I agree with you. It was first excuse me. It was a first reason for conducting post-enumeration survey is to check coverage and to check data quality too. And it shows us where we have gaps about conducting survey and census, and maybe it's
The outcome was satisfactory. I mean, the quality assessment was satisfactory.
Assessment census, and it was great to assess how census was conducted.
Okay, so thank you very much, Irakli.
Thank you.
Let's move on to our third speaker. The next country experience is from Hungary. The presentation will be made by Gabor Valko. Gabor is head of sectoral statistics department of the Hungarian Central Statistical Office. He started to work in the statistical office 23 years ago. During his professional career, he dealt with statistics on agriculture, environment, industry, tourism, transport, and prices. That was wide coverage, Gabor. He received a PhD in 2015, and he wrote his PhD dissertation, about the development of an indicator system for measuring sustainability of agriculture in the EU. Gabor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So good morning. This is my pleasure to be here and to give you a presentation entitled New Methodological Solutions for the Implementation of Agricultural Census 2020 in Hungary. And let me introduce you the co-author of this paper, Agnes Patai. She's sitting in the second row, and she is also the project leader of the Agricultural Census project in Hungary. So first, let me tell you some facts about the Hungarian agriculture. In Hungary, the land area takes 57% of the total territory of Hungary, which is quite high compared to the other EU countries. And perhaps this is one of the reasons for being the share of agriculture quite high also. This is 3.6. This is the share of agriculture in the national GDP compared to other EU countries. And Hungary is not a big country, so our contribution to the output of the EU agriculture is 2%. So why do we need modernization? The answer is that in the last 50 years, the Hungarian agriculture went through quite a deep changes, which was not really followed by the structure of agricultural statistics and the methodology of agricultural statistics. I brought some pictures for you to illustrate these changes in the Hungarian agriculture. On the left side, you can see a picture of typical horticultural production in the 80s. And on the right side, you can see a picture on modern tomato growing. So here on the left side, you can see a picture about animal husbandry that was typical in the 80s. At those times, animals were kept, most of the animals were kept near the houses, at the houses in the villages. Why now it's decreasing drastically, and now the right-hand side picture is a typical picture of animal husbandry in Hungary. And here you can see a backyard on the left side that was typical in the 80s, where animals were kept at the houses, and there was a backyard garden, a kitchen garden with crops, potato and other crops that they grew. And now on the right-hand side, you can see an illustration of how the backyard farming is disappearing in Hungary. So after the pictures, some statistics. You can see the decreasing number of private holdings in Hungary. In Hungarian terms, private holdings are the households plus the private entrepreneurs. And you can see that on the first bar in 1972, that was more than 1.8 million, the number of private holdings, and it was decreasing to 2016 to 4,300. So it's quite a dramatic loss of private holdings. It doesn't mean that the agricultural production is going down, but it means a concentration of this production. On this next graph, you can also see the signs of concentration. Here you can see the land area of private holdings under 1 hectare. So this is the land area altogether for the small scale holdings. And in the 25 years that you can see in the graph, there was a reduction of 85%. So now we have these small scale holders taking only less than 1% of the agricultural area in Hungary. You can see the thresholds for land area in the EU, and you can see that Hungary has one of the lowest thresholds for the land area. This is 1,500 square meters in Hungary, and there are countries with even 2, 3, and 5 hectare thresholds. From this introduction, you can guess what one part of the modernization can be in Hungary. This is the raising of the thresholds. Another part of the methodological development is the development of a new farm register. And the third part is a new methodology for data collection. So first about the new farm register. Our current farm register is quite outdated, both technically and methodologically. It was developed 20 years ago, so it's quite old. And in this current register, there's no connection with administrative databases. So this is not updated from administrative sources. So we started to develop a new register, which is connected to the Central Statistical Office's own registers, the register for addresses and the business register. And this new register would also be connected to 12 other administrative registers, including ICAS, that is the register for subsidies, and also the member list of the Hungarian Chamber of Agriculture, also to the systems for identification of animals, and also to the registers for organic farming. This new register will be updated regularly, and what is new in Hungary that the register will not only contain the regular register information, addresses, things like that, but it will also contain production data. What is quite difficult in building a register in Hungary, that's the linking of the different databases. We have learned that some of the agricultural producers do not identify themselves in the different administrative sources according to the definition of agricultural holding in statistics. what they do is that they optimize their income, they optimize their structure of how they structurize their agricultural production according to the rules of subsidies to get higher income. This is very good for them, but this is a nightmare for statisticians, you can imagine. On the left-hand side, you can see an illustration of quite an easy case. There is a holding that has two entities in one source, that's the green circles, and another entity in the second source. Source means the administrative source here. But on the right-hand side, you can get a net of different entities from different sources that is quite complicated. This is a real one. So you can imagine how complicated it is to put together an agricultural holding according to the rules, the statistical rules. So we have quite a lot of difficulties with linking. One of the most difficult things is that there are no common unique identifier in the different databases. We have an identifier for statistical purposes. There is another identifier for the purposes of subsidies. Thank you. And another difficulty is that all databases have different structures. They are not built for statistical purposes. And also the data quality is quite poor. There are misspelled names in the different sources, there are wrong addresses, and sometimes the information is quite old, and the level of the update level of information is different in the different databases. So the second element for the modernization is raising of the thresholds. You can see in this table the new thresholds that we'll use in the Agricultural Census 2020. You might remember that for the agriculture area, the current thresholds for Hungary is 1,500 square meters, and we will use for the productive area 1 hectare, which equals 10,000 square meters. So it's quite a big raise of the thresholds. I'm not going to go through all the different details, but there are some raising at all the different categories. But with all these changes, we are still below the common EU thresholds. For example, for the utilized agricultural area, the EU threshold is 5 hectares. So we are still well below of the EU thresholds. And we can meet the EU coverage criteria. There is no problem with that. And there was quite a wide consultation in Hungary about these new thresholds, and all the stakeholders around agriculture are agreeing with these new thresholds, including the Ministry of Agriculture. So there's not going to be a problem about it in Hungary. The third element is a change in the data collection methodology. Currently, because we cannot use a register for these purposes, what we do is house-to-house or door-to-door survey in the districts for agricultural survey. We do it for the agricultural census, we do it for the farm structure surveys, and also for the semi-annual agricultural surveys. In the future methodology, starting from 2020, based on the regularly updated new farm register, there's going to be a targeted data collection, which means that we are not going to go from house to house, but we will go to the addresses where agricultural production is anticipated from the administrative sources. In case of an agricultural census, instead of visiting 2.3 million addresses, in 2020 we will only visit 7,500,000 addresses. It means less cost and less administrative burden on the respondents. So as a conclusion, with this new methodology, the following aims can be fulfilled. As I said, it's a more targeted data collection, and we will improve the data quality because we can focus on those holdings that are really producing for the market, and we can focus the data checking capacity and the dissemination and everything on these holdings. And we will reduce the cost of surveys, and we will reduce also the reporting burden. So with this, I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Gabor. He has presented us the efforts, the ongoing efforts in Hungary to integrate agricultural surveys, agricultural census with administrative registers. Any questions for Gabor? We have one here, 2, 3. Okay, let's stop there. Mike, please. For the lady here, please raise your hand so he knows. Yeah.
Okay, good afternoon.
Could you identify yourself, please?
Yes. My name is Ratna. I'm from Indonesia. I work at BPS Statistical Indonesia in the Food Crop Statistic Division. I'm just curious about the administrative data that you will conduct in the Agricultural Census 2020. Can you explain me how you manage the farmer to do the register by themselves? You said that you will only survey a small number of the farmer door to door, and then the other will do the administrative data. How you manage that and make sure the administrative data will going well. Thank you.
Let's move to the next question.
Thank you. Irina Orishnik from Slovenia, consultant for agriculture statistics. I have two questions. The first question is you mentioned that in your farm register you will also include production data. My question is, what is the reason to include the production data, and what will be the source for the production data in the register? The second question is related to the threshold, and I would like to ask you what kind of implications you consider by changing the threshold in the annual statistics, and also whether do you foresee any revision of the time series, either in terms of structural statistics or in terms of annual statistics afterwards. Thank you.
Okay, the next one.
Augustine, Canada. In terms of the farm register, are you also going to change the definition of a farm holding or agricultural holding? The second question relates to what the lady already said. Because you are changing the farm register, or you're updating the farm register, are you going to backcast the data, and how many years are you going to backcast?
Okay, back to you, Gabor.
So thank you very much for the questions. First question. So we are using some administrative sources, and your question was how the farmers know that they should be in these administrative sources, as I understood well. So we are using, for example, we are using the subsidy database. This is quite clear that they want to be in this database because they want subsidies. So they register themselves for money. So this is one of the most exact data sources that we use. There is another one, for example, the Chamber of Agriculture, the member list of the Chamber of Agriculture. We use this data source. It's compulsory in Hungary to be registered in the Chamber of Agriculture. Of course, it's not that reliable compared to the subsidies database, but it's still reliable. There is another data source, is the registers for animals. This is also compulsory for all animals. I mean, the bigger animals like cattle, to be registered. So it's a compulsory thing to be registered. So we hope that to put together all these databases will result in a quite reliable list of the addresses that we should visit. So I hope I answered your question. The question of Irena, the production, what was it, the production data? Why production data are included in the... Yes. The reason for that we can use the register for sampling, for example, for the different layers of sampling. If there is production data beside the information, we can see if it's a big producer or a middle or a small producer, so we can use it for sampling, for example. And the production data comes from administrative sources, but also it comes from statistics. So the agricultural census will be a source also for the register, so that we can see what they produce, and it can be written in the data in the register. About the threshold revision, we plan to do some revisions. It's of the whole country production data. It's not going to be a huge difference. As I told you, there is that we lose production is about 1% or less than 1%. So it's quite a small amount for the. Of course, there are differences for the different crops and the different animals, but generally it's less than 1%, so it's not going to be a big change. But we try to revise the data back to at least 2010. For the third question, we use the same definition of farm holdings, so it's not different. It's an EU definition of farm holdings. What we do is only to raise the threshold, so it's not part really a definition. There is a common threshold that we have to meet in the EU, but it's much higher than the new threshold that we are going to use, and it depends on the different countries to use whatever thresholds they want. There is only one criteria, that 28% of the land area and also 28% of the animals should be covered. That's the rule in the EU. And we can meet with this. Sorry. No. That would be too low. Thank you. 98%. Sorry for that. But we still meet 98, so we do not meet 28, but 98%. Okay. And backcasting, I think I answered this question already. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gabor. We have 20 minutes left only and 2 presentations to go, so we better move on to the next one. He's from Canada, Augustine. I think his presentation is copied already there? Okay. Perfect. So Augustine is the acting director of the Agriculture Division at Statistics Canada. He has worked at Statistics Canada since 1997 and has held several positions within the agency, including Assistant Director responsible for the Canadian Census of Agriculture, Chief of the Surface Transportation Program, and Chief of the Capital Expenditure Program. The floor is yours, Augustine.
Thank you, Jaro, for the presentation, for the introduction. My colleague, Etienne St. Pierre, is supposed to deliver this presentation. He submitted the abstract, but he got promoted when the call came for the submission of the paper. So I have to step in and do the presentation. To start off, Canada has a centralized statistical system. And also, the Canadian Census of Agriculture, by law, is an embodiment of the Canadian statistical system. Because the Statistics Act indicates that one of the duties of the statistical agency is to undertake the census of population and the census of agriculture of Canada. However, the 2 systems are conducted separately. The Act also specifies that the census should be mandatory and conducted every 5 years. It is therefore not a coincidence that the Census of Agriculture is integrated in the National Statistical System with respect to frame development, data collection, processing, and dissemination, and the use of IT infrastructure. While some progress has been made over the years, this integration must be brought to the next level to ensure the relevance and sustainability of the Census of Agriculture program. So basically for this presentation, I will talk about the Census of Agriculture, the evolving context or the drivers, the advantages of the Census of Agriculture integration in the National Statistical System, and activities related to the Census of Agriculture integration in the National Statistical System. For the Canadian Census of Agriculture, the environment is changing, and there's the need for a much greater integration with the National Statistical System. The Canadian agricultural operations are becoming more and more complex. The proportion of incorporated farms increased, for example, from 2.2% in 1971 to 25.1% in 2016. These businesses are best handled using Statistical Canada's business register rather than the traditionally used social survey processes. There is also increased availability of alternative agricultural data sources. We have in Statistics Canada about 300 available admin data sources and satellite imagery information that are available to the program. Data users are also increasingly demanding for more agricultural information beyond the primary agriculture sector. For example, data related to environment, manufacturing, energy, transportation, international trade, and prices to measure efficiencies and to identify broad issues affecting one or more sectors and the need for this information to be timely. There's also advances in technological capacity, such as AI and machine learning, which is making it possible to process that large data sets, which in the past posed a number of challenges. Now, there are several advantages, but I'm going to mention just 3 main advantages with respect to integration of the census in the National Statistical System. There's the possibility to plan and develop the Census of Agriculture program without duplication of operational collection, processing, and analytical activities, or the release of conflicting statistics, while ensuring the efficiency and balance of use of available statistical resources. Secondly, there's the harmonization of concepts, definitions, and classifications in use in other agricultural survey programs and other economic studies programs that can also benefit the Census of Agriculture. There's also the harmonization of questionnaire content among the statistical, agricultural statistical programs to facilitate what we call collect once, use multiple times approach to minimize response burden. Now, I'm going to address some of the issues or some of the major activities designed in recent years to ensure a better integration of the Census of Agriculture in the Canadian statistical system as Statistics Canada embarks on a modernization agenda. First, in 2021, that is the year for our next census, we're going to use the business register as the central frame or the common frame for the Census of Agriculture. The business register is the common frame for all business surveys at Statistics Canada. We will adopt the business register as the sole frame for 2021. In line with this, we are changing the definition of a farm to align with the business register concepts. Here, we are proposing that a farm is a unit that produces agricultural products and reports revenue or expenses for tax purposes to the Canada Revenue Agency. In the past, part of the census population were derived from the business register. Another part was also derived from the census of population, where we add a question to the census of population asking people to identify themselves if they are farmers. This created a lot of problems and when we got this information from the census of population because of difficulties in linking to the business register. This adoption of the task-based definition will also ensure alignment with other Statistics Canada's economic statistics programs to enable the production of horizontal analysis or horizontal data relevant for timely, which is relevant, timely, and integrated farm register with food processing, trade, transportation, health, energy, and environment. The Census of Agricultural Data is also used to benchmark data and reconcile with common statistics and indicators in the agricultural statistics program. So here, what we are trying to do is, with this integration of both the Census of Agriculture data and also the agricultural statistics programs, the data is actually used in the Canadian system of national account, especially to produce GDP numbers and other indicators. I've already talked about the collect once multiple use, and also integrating some of the content for questions already exists on the questionnaire. Now, what happens is that if we already collect information on the survey, we are not going to collect that information on the Census of Agriculture, but however, we will use the data coming from the survey to populate the content on the Census of Agriculture. We have tested this in May of 2019 when we did our census test, using information from the greenhouse survey, maple, mushroom, and other surveys. We are also going to expand the use of electronic data collection methods. This is based on the experience from the 2016 Census of Agriculture. In 2021, we are targeting a 70% electronic take-up rate, compared with 58% in 2016. Paper will obviously be submitted or sent to respondents when they call the census helpline, and we are anticipating only 10% of sample. Integration of the Census of Agriculture activity with the Census of Population. As I mentioned at the beginning, even though the Census of Agriculture and the Census of Population are conducted at the same time, they both have different questionnaires, they have different processing systems. However, the Census of Agriculture takes advantage of a number of activities that are conducted by a Census of Population, for instance, in terms of printing, communication messages, and contract management. This is the way to reduce the cost, because if the Census of Agriculture was supposed to be doing this as a standalone program, it will cost the agency 25% more to conduct the Census of Agriculture. By aligning with the Census of Population, we tend to reduce this cost. However, at the end, when we have the Census of Agriculture database and the Census of Population, we are able to link the two data sets to create what we called agricultural population data linkage. This enables us to provide users with a very rich and detailed socioeconomic portrait of the Canadian farm population. Lastly, one of the activities that we are doing is to integrate the Census of Agriculture processing systems into what we call the Integrated Business Register at Statistics Canada. Now, the Integrated Business Register is comprised of about 130 statistical programs, economic statistics programs within the agency. And here, there's a harmonization of concepts, the use of common tools and processing, the use of common generic edit and invitation processes. The key here is what we see in the center of what we call rolling estimates. Now, in the past, when we collect the Census of Agriculture data, what happens is that we process it and there's manual intervention at every step of the process. So there's micro editing that is happening. This time around, as soon as the data is coming in, we'll run what we call the rolling estimates. So the data comes in through various sources, either tax, administrative data, auxiliary data files, collection data, and then we do data integration, run edit and invitation, allocation and estimation. So the process is very iterative. This is to reduce response burden, because during collection, we target only those units that have high impact or major impact on the overall estimates. So instead of doing micro editing, this time you'll be doing top-down approach to the editing process. And this is a key to reducing burden, to reduce cost, and also to integrate the whole Census of Agriculture program into the national statistical system. Thank you.
Thank you, Augustine. He has presented a Canadian ongoing efforts to integrate statistics, particularly through redefining the statistical unit and using the business register as the sole frame for the agricultural census. We have perhaps time for 1-2 questions. Okay, we have one there. Mike, please. Wait for the mic.
Hello, thank you. My name is Ute Weisemann from German Federal Statistical Office. I have a question to the definition of the farm. You said that in former times the farmers decided by themselves whether they are farmers or not. And nowadays this is related to the business register. Do you have there a special definition of the farm, or does it mean that only those farms, companies, households which have the main income from farming are now farmers, and if they have different incomes from other sources, they are not farmers? Perhaps you can explain this a bit broader. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. As I indicated, the definition of the farm is based on tax reporting. So it's a unit that produces agricultural product and reports expenses or revenue to the Canada Revenue Agency. So that's the definition of a farm. So there are instances where somebody may be engaged in 2 activities. For instance, you can be a tracker in tracking, and you can be also a farmer. In Canada, what happens is that if you're a tracker and you are a farmer, right, if you use the business form, because you can use the farm, for the tax system, there's a farm, one for farmers and one for businesses in general. So if you're a farmer, you can use both the business form and the tax form. Or you can use one business form, but however, when you go in through the tax form, there are areas where you report, is it a farm revenue or is it a farm income? And what type of commodity are you producing? So, if let's say on the business register, your NAICS on the classification system is tracking because you generate most of your income from the tracking business, right? What we are using is we are using machine learning techniques to be able to identify anybody who's reporting agricultural commodity on their tax form. So in a sense, we are using keywords. So I can use a keyword and look at the tax form and say, okay, you indicated that you have maybe cattle revenue or you have mushroom revenue, and I can get you and add you to the population. For those people who only have one activity as a farm, they have to use the various tax forms. However, nothing forces the farmer to use the farm tax form. You can just use the business form, and that is a challenge for us. So we are using artificial intelligence to be able to extract all those people who reported either farming income or farming revenue or farming expenses.
Okay. Thank you, Augustine. Another round of applause to Augustine. And we move quickly to the last presenter. We have less than 5 minutes, unfortunately. It is Antonio Martinez from Spain. He's going to present Spain's experience in integrating agricultural statistics, particularly with regards to the agricultural census. Antonio has been for the last 7 years the Director of Environmental and Agricultural and Financial Statistics at the National Statistical Office of Spain. As Director and regarding agricultural statistics, he's in charge of the 2020 Agricultural Census and the Integrated Farm Statistics Survey. At INE before, he was the Director of International Relations and Head of a regional office. He has also been working in other statistical domains such as tourism or national accounts. Antonio, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Castaño. It's for me a big pleasure to be here with you to present one of the most innovative projects of the National Statistical Institute of Spain in Spain during the last years, and this is the agricultural census, the 2020 agricultural census. The presentation is divided in 5 different parts, but don't worry, I know that I have a few time, so I will skip some of these parts to give you a really synthetic message of our census. Well, our census is based on a European Union regulation. This is a 2018 regulation, which was approved by the European Union Parliament and the European Union Council in this year. This regulation, let me underline 2 main issues of this regulation. First is Article 4 regarding the sources of information of our census. This regulation allows to carry out the census based in 3 different possibilities. First, statistical surveys. This was our common approach in the last census. Second, administrative sources. And finally, methods and innovative approaches. The regulation also requests for basic structural data. This is a total of 186 variables. This is Annex 3 of the regulation. And also modular data. These are different models with reference to 2020, 2023, and 2026. Well, for the first time in Spain, we are going to do a massive use of administrative records in a close, broad collaboration with different institutions in Spain. We are going to use these 5 registers that are mentioned in the regulation. This is the ICAS register, the registers on animals, the vineyard register, the organic farming register, and the rural development measures register. But we are also going to use, in addition, 20 additional registers, so that makes a total of 25 registers. And these are all national and regional registers. Some of them are sectoral, but we are also using Social Security System register and tax register. And why are we using all these 25 registers? First, for the elaboration of a quality census framework, and second, for a direct use of these administrative records to avoid direct collection of information. We are going to use these administrative sources for 60–65% of our framework. So we will avoid to make questions to around 700,000 farms. We are only going to investigate the other part, which makes around 300,000 50,000 farms. With this, we are going to make a significant decrease in the cost of the operation. So this is around 15 million euros less than in our last census, so more or less half of the cost of the operation. We are going to have a significant reduction of the response burdens on respondents, and we are going to have a continuous annual census because all this information is in our register, and this is an annual register. So we will going to update the register on an annual basis. We will have an annual census for the coming years. The rest, these 350,000 farms that we are going to investigate, we will do it through the current procedure with telephone, personal, and web interviews. The second challenge in our census is giving reply to all these models that are in the 2018 regulation, European Union regulation. And finally, a new challenge is opportunity. We are going to provide data only with 15 months after the reference period, at the end of the reference period. In the last census, this was 18 months for the core variables and 24 months for the non-core variables. How are we going to work? We have created, since 2017, an internal working group with the 8 different directorates that are implied in the census. We have carried out many different works up until now. We have the preliminary census framework. We have the census questionnaires for both Annex 3 and Annex 4. We have made validation edits, editing process. Now we are working in a pilot, in a 2019 pilot project. We are working in the methodology of the census, and we will have a final census framework in April 2020. And in the coming future, we are making the collection of information. We will have the data editing, the files estimated, and we will finally give the results on March 2022. Which are the possible risks of this innovative approach? First, the calendar. We have currently some delay in some of our phases. Second, the statistical unit. As you all know, the European Union regulation requests for a specific definition of the farm, and we are using declarations coming from the administrative register, so we need to translate the definition of the administrative records to the definition of our regulation. Third, classification. For some crops and pastures, there are some discrepancies between the ICAS classification and statistical definitions. And finally, the conciliation of new administrative sources and historical data from previous survey and censuses. Of course, we have an innovative approach in this census, but we want that our data be comparable with the data that we have provided in the last census and the last surveys. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Antonio, for being brief and to the point. Definitely, Spain's experience is going to be watched very carefully by many, including FAO, because of the lessons and for the experience that is going to live for other countries going in that direction, because going in that direction is the logical direction, is what most agricultural statistical systems probably need to adjust to. I open the floor for a couple of questions before we close. I like to remind you that this is the first part of this session. It continues this afternoon at 2 p.m. in hall number 6. Yes, so I see one hand here, 2. Okay, let's stop there. Mike, please.
2 questions.
Yeah, we had 2 questions, then we close. Sorry? Here, please.
Thank you, Antonio, for
brief,
your
please.
presentation. My name is Diana Martin. I'm from Uruguay, and we are trying to do the same you are doing. Difficulties with getting the information, the administrative information. What kind of difficulties did you have, or was it easy to get that information from the different sources that we are using, those different 26 sources that you are using? Thank you.
Second question, Augustine.
Statistics Canada is also embarking on a similar strategy. I'll talk about it later this afternoon. However, since you are using like 25 administrative data sources, do you have an issue with the public perception of using this information?
Thank you very much for the 2 questions. I'm glad that you are also in the same line that we are. As Mr. Castaño has mentioned, this is the future. I mean, we need to reduce the administrative burden. We need to reduce the cost, and the way to do it is using administrative records. So we can touch during these days about the common difficulties that we have with our census. And regarding this second question on the 25 administrative records, well, of course, these are public records. These are public administrative, so we can free the statistical by law. The Statistical Institute can use these administrative records by law to combine and to arrive to this framework of our census. Well, this is not an easy task, how to use these 25 administrative records. What we have done is we have made a ranking. So for us, for instance, the first administrative record is ICAS, and the second is the animal register, because these are the 2 main records that we are going to use to avoid direct collection. The other 23 are administrative records that we are going to use to build our framework, but not to avoid direct collection of information. For us, ICAS is in the main register to provide information, and in order to use this register, we change our law. We change a royal decree. We figure that around 90% of the total variables, of these 186 variables, 90% was already in the register. What we did, we changed the law, and we include these 10% of variables that we didn't have in the register. We include them in ICAS. So now we have a full picture, and we have our 186 variables of Annex 3 of the regulation in the ICAS register.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for your attendance. Enjoy your lunch, and see you at 2 p.m. in hall number 6. Thank you.